Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole. I'm so happy to be with you today. There are all kinds of creative projects that have been bubbling under the surface, and it takes a long time to bring your ideas to the public. It takes a lot of work, a lot of creativity, and just stick to itiveness. And so, when you discover a project that is special that you didn't know about, it's wonderful, at least for me, to be able to bring it to you. And I've got one like that to bring to you today. It's a wonderful new documentary called On the Line, the Richard Williams story. You know about Richard Williams, but you don't know about this documentary. Let me tell you about the two people who have put it together. They are Chavoita Lesane, who is the owner of Shavam LLC. He'll tell me if I said that right. He's collaborated with legends in the music world such as Byron Cleanface Trice, Ted Lucas of Slip and Slide Records, and Travis Knuckles of Universal Records. He is the son of Richard King Williams, and he helped to spearhead his father's memoir, Black and White, that came out in 2014 and currently serves as King Richard's manager. He's also delved into the film video world, where he's worked on the second season of Netflix's Hip Hop Life and AMC's Streets of Compton. And he's working with Stuart who is a director and producer who's making his directorial debut with this documentary On the Line. Previously, DeClave served as the development executive and producer for NBC Universal, Discovery Channel, and for the feature film producer Mark Ciardi. He is a graduate of USC School of Cinematic Arts and the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism. He's been doing his thing for a long time. Together, these gentlemen have created this documentary that debuted at the incredible Tribeca Festival, and they're here to talk about it now. So please join me in welcoming Stuart and Chavoita. Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Hi, great. How are you?
Great.
Wonderful, wonderful. Congratulations. Congratulations on this documentary. And as you know, well, as long as the Williams sisters have been hitting that ball back and forth, we've heard about Daddy in the background. You're making in the background, in the foreground, everywhere, making it happen. I remember when they first came on the scene, we knew that there had to be a powerhouse behind these young ladies in order for them to be as focused as they were. We also know that the feature film came out and the whole world started paying attention to King Richard all over again. But a documentary is different. This is him in the film, being himself, showing us all the creativity and thought process and work that went into uh, developing these two young ladies. I want to start with you, Chibate, because you are King Richard's son. Um, Going back and being able to put your hands on all this footage, talk about the process of gathering the footage to tell the story.
Uh, what I worked, of course, Stuart's my business partner. Stuart made it very streamless. So Stuart's really good at what he does. So it wasn't that difficult. My dad's always never camera shy. So with the both of them, they made the process not difficult at all. Actually, it was a long process, and that's due to COVID and the world changing so much. But it wasn't, like super difficult as far as getting footage and stuff put together. I think Stuart had dealt with the biggest of headaches when it came to dealing with like stock footage and stuff like that. But just getting out in the field and shooting, it was fun. So I had a great time.
And this is to either of you, like, but I'm thinking maybe to you, Chivate. Did your father store the footage that he took over all these years in particular places? Like, was it easy to find? Because a lot of times, those home movies and things are here, there, and everywhere in the garage.
Right,
You know.
right. Well, he did actually. We used to call it the doghouse. We
Ah,
had a bunch of hurricanes that came though, and they destroyed all the old footage, unfortunately.
oh no! So he did have it carefully tended to, but then it was gone.
Yeah, he loves cameras. He's always recording, taking pictures. He always wants the newest cell phones. Anything that's technology filming based or either listening based, he always wants the newest stuff. But unfortunately, back then, As you know, there's VHS. It was all tapes and stuff like that. We should store everything. Uh, his home, which was called Leisure Acres, and we had I think there was like 3 hurricanes that came back to back, and it destroyed the home in which the footage was kept in. So all of the old footage was destroyed.
So finding footage, and Stuart, it sounds like you were spearheading that. It, since all of that treasure was gone, how did you go about finding all this footage that you were able to use?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very, it's an interesting process dealing with this subject and this footage because, like Chavoita said, Mr. Williams had always had a camera and always were recording Venus and Serena or himself. And he was, it was like he was a filmmaker almost. He almost did my job for me. And there were times where he had shared home videos with other sources, and we were able to track down those sources. And then also, of course, when Venus and Serena were really young, so around 7 or 8, they started getting a lot of attention on the courts in Compton, and that was because Mr. Williams was calling news outlets in LA and really promoting his daughters, who were going to be the greatest tennis players who ever lived. And so we had all this early practice footage on the courts in Compton where you could really get to see what Mr. Williams was like on the courts with Venus and Serena as a father, as a tennis coach. And so there were a number of local news libraries around LA that shared with us this footage, and we were watching it, and it was long footage that had never been aired before. And it was incredible just to see him in his element and so driven and so determined and so passionate. And I think that's when, it was a really exciting time to be a part of this project too, because no one had really ever seen some of the way that he coached his daughters. I think there were a lot of misconceptions about how he coached his daughters, but then when you see him on the practice courts and you hear the lessons he's teaching them, it's very touching.
How did he come to do this? Like, how did tennis enter his life?
Chavoita,
You can take it. You can take it. Stuart knows the story very well.
Okay, all right, Stuart.
So he saw a tennis match on TV in 1978, and he was sitting in his living room in Compton with his then wife at the time, Orsine Price. And the lady that won the tournament, it was the French Open in 1978, had won, I think, $40,000. And Mr. Williams was working, I don't know, 5 jobs, maybe 6 jobs, maybe more in Compton to make ends meet. And he lived in Long Beach at the time too. And he had this brilliant idea of, you know what, I'm in the wrong business. If a young woman can make $40,000 playing a tennis tournament for a week or two, he was going to have 2 daughters, and they were going to have double the winnings, and they were going to be the greatest there ever was. And he had so much confidence that he could master the game and then transform those lessons onto his 2 daughters. And so that's what happened. He went to Orsine and told her that he wanted 2 more daughters, and they had several conversations, and lo and behold, Venus was born, and then a year later, Serena. And then he got to work. The whole family got to work.
Don't forget, Stuart, he had to trick her into having 2 kids.
Yeah, there is that story. Yeah, the birth control pill story.
Okay, what's that story? Do tell.
Chavoita, that's you.
Well, she according to what my dad said, she did not want to have more kids. So what he decided
kids they have at that point? How many kids?
I want to say 3 or 4, I believe. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was 3 or 4. 3, could be 4.
Okay.
But
Right.
long story short, Orsine didn't want more kids. So he decided he was going to hide her birth control. And that's how he ended up creating Venus and Serena by hiding birth control pills.
That's just so many things right there.
Yeah.
Right.
But also just the vision. I mean, think about this. That because I've heard the story, but I wanted to have you say it out loud. But that your vision is so clear. You need to make 2 more children to be, the future leaders of the world in this breakout sport that doesn't occur where you live. And then you'll make 2 girls, you have 2 girls, and it happens. This is incredible vision. obviously powered by
Mhm.
grace, because just because you want something to happen doesn't mean it always does. But to be in an environment that was not conducive to the sport,
Yeah.
or just even the potentials. Tennis is a very expensive sport,
Right.
and despite all of those things, his vision was able to pierce any obstacles that were in the way. Chavoita, as you were growing up, were you living with your dad? Like
No.
how much did you actually see?
I saw a lot, but tennis really wasn't like my thing.
Sure.
Uh, when me and my dad would get together, I think he really wanted me to learn golf,
Mm.
and then he finally gave up when I dug so many holes out in the yard. He was like, "Nah, it's okay."
but
So, but
when you
I
were
I got to see
growing
I
up,
got
did you
this.
spend time with them too?
Yes, I got to see really how he thinks and sees life, very intimately, which is different. He thinks differently. I learned the way he think is more so the right way of thinking. Like he's what I consider to be a pure heart person. Like he 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 never tries to hurt anyone with nothing he does. But when he puts a vision or a thought in mind, he's gonna give it 120% of his energy, and he's not gonna let anything distract him. He's not worried about the obstacles in front of him. He's just worried about reaching the success.
Now he is from Shreveport, Louisiana, right?
Freeport, yes.
And was he and his family part of the Great Migration? Were they part of that wave of coming in this case coming west to create better opportunity? Do you
I'm
know
not
his migration story?
I'm not sure. I know Shreveport, as far as him growing up there, he speak of it often because he always talk about like the tragedies he had to witness of his really was like three best friends he had growing up, and just how hard life was in Shreveport. But he said that his mom helped him to look at life differently during the time period he was growing up, as into you never develop hate in your heart. You always try and carry this sense of love and respect for people regardless. And that's who he is, no matter what. Even when I would go to a few of the tennis matches and would hear the stuff, and he would be like, "Don't say nothing. Don't you do nothing. It's not your cross to bear. You sit there and you just stay focused in on the match." I like even at the practices I got to witness, when they would practice together, just how tough it was and how he prepared them more so mentally than physically to be great. Uh, which is important. A lot of people, they never realize or would never had a chance to understand how my dad, he works very well with kids. He's just awesome when it comes to working with kids and dealing with the psyche of a kid. He told the story, and I know Stuart heard me tell the story 1,000 times, but it always sticks in my heart. He was he was like, you know what, the worst tennis player I ever saw in my life. I say, who was the worst tennis player you ever saw in your life? That he said, Venus Williams, and I started laughing. I was like, no way, because to me, Venus is just like the best. I just love her game when she's at the top of her game. She's just like, yeah, I don't watch a lot of tennis, but I would definitely sit there and watch Venus play just because she's like the Michael Jordan of tennis to me,
Yeah.
just when she's at the top of her game. And I was like, Dad, I said, that don't make sense to me. He said, she was the worst. He said, when she was little, she would hit the ball over the fence. She would hit the ball way over there and over here. I said, well, how did you know she was going to be great then if she was so horrible? He said, because guess what? She didn't know it. He said when she would hit the ball over the fence or do this or do that, I'll be like, Venus, that was so great the way you just hit that ball. He said, Venus would be like, Dad, what are you talking about? I hit over the fence. He said, but the way you hit it over the fence, which is awesome.
That encouragement. That encouragement counts for so much.
So much, so
I,
much.
I this program is called Dreamleapers. It is a project that I created to help people access and activate their dreams. I do lots of workshops and engagements with folks to help them to get to that point. And what I've seen time and again is what you're describing is if you get encouragement, if someone is cheerleading you and saying, yes, you can do it. And, it may take a while for your idea to be refined enough for it to be valuable enough to carry forward. But if you have
Right.
folks supporting you, it makes a huge difference for you to keep pushing and keep pushing. Let me remind folks, you are listening to Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. We are talking about this incredible documentary that has just made its debut at Tribeca Festival. It is called On the Line, the Richard Williams story. And with us, the creators are Chavoita, Lesane, and Stuart McClave. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I love that you are here talking about this film. And I want to know how long it took to make it happen, because documentaries, typically, it's a labor of love. It's, you don't get the big bucks like you get if it's a feature film with big names, who are headlining. It takes a lot. And you mentioned, Chavoita, that you also had COVID in the middle of this. But when did this idea begin? Was it with your father's book, or how did it begin that this should be a film? And what is your process of bringing this film to life?
It was a 15-year journey for me.
Wow.
Like I said, I wasn't big into like the game of tennis, but I was always an admirer of just how special my dad was.
Mhm.
So I always sort of started documenting things, and I've always told him that his story is going to be on the big screen. He doubted that, actually. He told me, he's like, I'm not that important. Nobody would care about my movie. He would say that to me, but I just realized his thought process, I felt, could really inspire other people, and I felt like it would make a great film. So it was a 15-year journey for me. It was a blessing when I got the email call from Stuart. Stuart is a tennis nut. He loves tennis.
I do.
So it was this perfect marriage. He would want to call me in the early days to talk about tennis. I say, Stuart, I don't like tennis that much, right?
That is true.
Stuart, when did you get involved? When did it concretize and become a thing that you were making?
I think it was, I think it started for me before I even got in contact with Chavoita. About 2019, I was just doing a bunch of research on Mr. Williams, and I'd grown up playing competitive tennis, and I was the biggest fan of the Williams family. Like every single person in that family, I knew their birthdays, how many matches they played, like everything about them. I would force my dad to drive hundreds of miles to see them play. And the one thing that I did notice at that time, this was like in the 90s and early 2000s, was that every time they talked about Mr. Williams, it was, it either began or ended with the word crazy. And in that time, they were kind of like, the connotation wasn't, now you might say he's crazy, but in such a great way that he changed the world. But at that time, it was almost like they were knocking him down a bit. And, I think it was in 2019, I had maybe seen an interview, or I was reading some research about him, and I was reading about his upbringing in Shreveport, Louisiana, and what he went through. And it all kind of clicked for me that actually these people that were calling him crazy just had no idea who he was and what he had experienced growing up. And they didn't want to know. They kind of like wrote him off as a controlling, manipulative father that like did all these things to get his daughters on tennis courts. And upon research, I was like, that's just not true. Like, this is a dedicated father that had a vision, that had a dream, that really worked so hard day in and day out to accomplish that dream. And that was amazing to me. And so I found out some connection to Chavoita, who I knew helped get Black and White the way I see it in the hands of a bunch of people with Simon & Schuster. And we got connected, and I told him how much of a fan of Mr. Williams I am. And we started talking about what a documentary could look like and how it would go. And it's just been the rest is history. Chavoita and I have worked very, very hard since then. And like you said, documentaries are not always the easiest to pull off with limited resources and whatnot. But
Right.
I think it's just both of us had a vision, and we really, really worked hard to make sure we were doing this story justice and doing his dad's story justice. And yeah, it's been a journey, but a good one. Like, it's been very exhilarating at times.
And so, talk about production during COVID, because the world shut down, screeching halt shut down. In the early days, people really weren't getting together because for smart reasons. But when you're working in a creative field and you need to be in each other's company, at least in part, to do the work, what happened? How did you continue working? Because it sounds like you began the formal work right before COVID struck. So how did you work?
Yeah, we met up right before COVID struck, and we had a couple conversations just to really get comfortable with one another and to make sure Mr. Williams was comfortable with me as well. And it was nice to finally meet Chavoita in person, because Chavoita lives in Florida and I'm in LA. So, it was great to finally get together in person. But then obviously COVID hit, and there were maybe plans to go film the Miami Open in 2020, which was one of the first tennis tournaments that was canceled because of COVID. That was like March 2020. And then it was really about like taking a step back, figuring out what we could do, figuring out the protocols in place to keep everyone safe. A couple of people did get COVID, not really while we were filming, but kind of like during that time in the beginning where people were getting it. And then I think the bulk of the work really happened in later fall of 2021, where Chavoita and I went down to Shreveport, Louisiana, and filmed with Mr. Williams. And he took us around where he grew up in that neighborhood and talked a lot about his mom and the influences of his childhood. And that was really, really powerful. And luckily at that time, COVID had died down a little bit. People were getting vaccinated. We were wearing masks. But it was, obviously this still is very, very up in the air. So
it's one of the strangest times, certainly in our lifetime, that's to be sure.
Right.
So, Chavoita, talk about your dad now. We see him in the footage, and he's still got that conviction about him. And he's an older man. He talks about having had 2 strokes, and his health is tender. How's he doing now, and what's he thinking about today?
Actually, he had 3 strokes, so which was really terrifying. But it was like one point I lived with him for about a year, maybe a little bit over a year, and just made sure he had round the clock care. And now he's great. He drives to my house now. Which scares me sometimes.
How old is he now?
Wow, 78, Stuart.
I think he's actually 80 or 70.
80. Yeah. He's 80 now? No, 79, right?
79, but I think he just turned 80 like a few
No,
months.
his birthday's on Valentine's Day, actually. I thought it was 79. Stuart could be right. So it could be 80. Stuart know all the birthdays, everything else. Because
He's 80 years old.
My dad's a Jehovah's Witness, so they don't celebrate birthdays.
Oh, that's right.
So it's a little different.
That's right. So right. Mm-hmm.
No, they don't. So he is actually doing very well. He actually got a mohawk haircut now, so I had to take pictures with him with his mohawk. So yeah, with him, you never know. He'll pull up to my house or my office, and I don't know what to expect until he gets out the car.
But he's obviously done his work. His daughters, I think, have potentially even surpassed the vision that he had for them. Maybe not. I know the vision was so big, but does he feel that there's something that he's to be doing now?
He's still writing, so we're putting together the second book. We're looking at some other film projects as well. He's very active with his younger son, Junior. takes Junior through the same regimen I think he took us all through, where you wake up early in the morning, you're on your math, you're reading. He has a different plan for Junior. He wants Junior to really get into more commodities, bonds, stocks. So yeah, he always has purpose. That's what gets him going. He always has purpose. It's always something. Even when I had to stay with him for the year, I was like, oh. He would wake me up like 4 or 5 in the morning, be like, "Don't you feel like you should be doing something?" I said, "Yeah, sleeping."
But you know what? You might recall this when we first started learning about Barack Obama. He said that his mother used to wake him up at 4:30 in the morning to do homework before she went to work, because that was the only time that she could help him. And so whether he liked it or not, he was up at 4:30. It's interesting to see, the role of parents, the role of, it's usually a parent, but somebody who is there pushing to ensure that you can be your best, pushing to make sure that no matter what, even when you don't feel like it, that you're still going to put forth that effort. I mean, that is what comes through so clearly
right.
with your father's life and story. But as you mentioned, still, if you're supposed to be helping him heal, and he's waking you up early in the morning, I can imagine that sometimes, I mean, that strength and push of his would have to be difficult sometimes to handle when you just want to be yourself and do what you want to do. Can you give us any examples of you trying to push back when your father was trying to make you do something?
Oh no, that's King Richard. You don't push at all. I can give you examples of how he always. Now, at one point, like I was running my healthcare company and was probably doing like 3 to 5 million a year, and he would get mounds of golf balls, and they come in these big, heavy square box, and I mean, he would get like probably about like 50 or 60 of these boxes a month. So, and we would pile them all up at the doghouse because he loved to golf. He would call me over. Now, mind you, I said I'm running a $3 to $5 million a year company. Right. He would call me over. I could be in my suit or whatever. He wouldn't care. He'd be like, "Move those boxes from that side of the doghouse to the other side of the doghouse." Seriously.
And you would do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. I mean, of course. The girls would be out there hitting tennis balls and stuff. They would be looking over laughing because I'd be sweating profusely and moving golf balls from one side of the house to the other side of the house. It never made sense because I didn't want to ask why, because I felt like he might give me more work to do. So I just removed the box.
What qualities do you feel that you have adopted that came from your father?
A much better parent. Looking at the way he parents stuff, the way he handles business, just how he deals with people and life in general. I really accredit a lot of who I am today to him. He just has this way of looking at things, and your glass is always half full; it's not half empty. He's such a fighter. But he uses so much wisdom in those battles. And I always pray to be more like him every day, to be honest. It's like he sees everything 2 steps ahead.
Yeah, he's visionary. There's absolutely no question about that. I think we all can agree with that. We in the film, we see that there are plenty of people who he rubbed the wrong way, as my mother used to say. I mean, a lot of folks did not like that he was up in their face pushing these girls on them, because the tennis world is an elite world that was predominantly white. And here are these folks coming in from a different world, and he was pushing. How do you think, and you may have seen this, Stuart, through the footage, how do you think he was able to not let that pierce his heart? When what sometimes was like hatred.
Yeah, the thing that I think I admire the most of Mr. Williams is that he refused to play by rules that weren't designed for him. And so he was in this sport that had a certain way of operating, certain etiquettes, certain way of you know, you don't cheer for your daughters outwardly or openly. You kind of just, you have to be composed. You have to do that. And Mr. Williams refused to do that because that's just, you know, it didn't sit right with him. And I've watched many hours, thousands of hours of footage with Mr. Williams over the years, and he never deviated from that. He was always himself. He never let anything kind of bring him down, even at the Indian Wells tournament in 2001, which is a huge part of the film. You know, where the crowd turned against him and his family. He just left that tournament. He was like, you know what, we're not going to play there. And he just called out that incident as racist, which is exactly what, you know, it was. And he was adamant about that. And the tennis world really couldn't understand. They didn't want to understand him, like I said earlier. So they were kind of like, in a sense, just writing him off and maybe gaslighting him a little bit, because they were saying, you know what, it wasn't racist and all this. And he was like, no, it is. And I just really admire that when he has a belief, a dream, a conviction, he commits 150,000%. And that's his thing. And he'll go to the end of the earth with that commitment, with that dream to make it happen. I've never met anyone in my life like that before. And I think there's some inherent power that's wired deep within him that you can't explain really. You can show it in a documentary and maybe you can start to understand, but I don't know if we'll ever quite understand exactly what drives that, you know, and where does that come from? Because, sure. Yeah.
I hear you. Let me remind folks, you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. We are talking about this incredible documentary that has just debuted, and you definitely have to see this film. It is worth seeing. You're going to see footage of Venus and Serena Williams when they were little girls learning how to play tennis. This is all about them and their dad. It's called On the Line, the Richard Williams story, just filled with incredible footage that most of us have never seen. In fact, as has been described, they dug deep to access footage that really shows not fictionalized, but actual footage of Mr. Williams and his family, his daughters, his family, the road to success for them, and many of the challenges that were faced along the way. I want to share with everyone listening, I tell you this every week, WBAI is a public radio station. It is our community radio station. We never have one commercial on here. It's just listeners and hosts and wonderful guests like we have today. And it is because you are the ones you're the fuel. So we need you to make a contribution. And we'd love for you to make a contribution today. Of any kind is great because every dollar counts. You can call us and make a contribution at 212-209-2950. And it can be a one-time contribution. There's also something called BAI Buddy. That's when you make a monthly contribution that, of course, could help us keep the lights on, keep the gas on. We also have a huge tower in Times Square that we pay in order for our signal to be as strong as it is. So anything you give makes a difference. That monthly, if you want to be a BAI Buddy, you can do it in honor of Dreamleapers, this program that you're listening to right now. You call us at 212-209-2950, or you can go online at give2WBAI.org. I will let folks know, and Stuart and Chavoita.
I say.
Thank you, Chavoita. It's a beautiful name, and I have to get that pronunciation right, Chavoita. We are 62 years old. This radio station has survived so many things. A progressive radio station in New York City that's 62 years old. That's significant
That's awesome.
Commercials, right? It's all listener sponsored. We have a very strong core of people. And especially as we've had these conservative waves happen in our culture when fake news was the norm, you don't get fake news here. You get the truth here. And that's why we're so grateful to be here. So folks, call us 212-209-2950. And please be part of making sure that we will continue to have wonderful guests like the guests that we have on today. So, gentlemen, I want to, Stuart, you said that you were a tennis player for many years and you followed the family for many years. So, knowing the world of tennis, the way that you have, really from the inside out, in the storytelling in this film, what did you think was important for people to see and learn about tennis and the impact that Mr. Williams had on this sport? And I ask it from the perspective because you have a lot of historical footage. There's a lot of compare and contrast. What were the lessons that you felt were important for people to take away from the film?
Yeah, what I really wanted people to take away was to understand the way that the media and the tennis establishment reacted to the Williams family when they first came on the scene, because I think that was the most tangible evidence of the way that they were kind of unfairly treated in a lot of ways. So, for instance, there's a section of the film where Venus Williams makes her U.S. Open debut in 1997. And she's very young. She's still a teenager. She ended up making it to the final. Yet, despite the fact that she was an unbelievable tennis player that was beating all of her opponents up until the final, the media coverage of her was predominantly negative. And the media coverage of her and her family and her father, and it was headlines calling her unfriendly, saying that people hated them in the locker room. There was this, they were treated as if they were different. And I felt like that was really important to show that even despite the fact that now the world has fallen in love with Venus and Serena, and they are two of the most influential, most famous people on the planet, that wasn't always the case. And Mr. Williams called that out. There were several instances in that tournament where even in the semifinal, her opponent bumped into Venus Williams intentionally after. And then after that incident, Mr. Williams called that out as racist. And it was a very clear moment for him of, listen, my family is being treated differently. This is a young woman that can play tennis better than all these other players. She is one of the first female Black tennis players to really make waves at Grand Slams. Obviously, we had Althea Gibson before this and some other influential players like Zena Garrison. But, she was really making waves. And I thought that was really important because we can learn from those lessons. I don't think that now you would see the same headlines. And obviously, since the Williams family, we've had several players of color who have risen to the top: Naomi Osaka, Madison Keys, Coco Gauff, Sloane Stephens, and they were all influenced by Mr. Williams and Oracene and Venus and Serena. And I think that it was important to show that they've had a little bit of an easier time, not to say that they haven't had their own challenges, but tennis was changed when Venus Williams and Serena Williams really came on the scene and kind of broke down that barrier over and over again.
And, that Mr. Williams called racism what it is. He called it out and said it. That's a pretty powerful thing, too. To call a spade when at the same time, he's building and doing everything he can to make sure that they can get to the next level. Sometimes calling something racist can shut everything down because you're not supposed to say that out loud. And not only did he say it out loud, he said it out loud in the press conference. I mean, you show this in the film. It's really quite remarkable, the courage that he had to say what was obvious, but people often don't do that.
Yeah.
So the lesson for you as a family member, I'm wondering about the lesson in courage, the lesson in speaking up and being willing to call out racism when it's happening. Can you talk about that?
Me?
Yes.
I'm a lot like my dad, so I do call out things that I see. and I do fight a lot for the underdog, but I don't just call it out. I try to use wisdom before I speak. It's like you said, sometimes it can add fuel in the wrong kind of way. And then you have to use wisdom as in how you call it out.
Yes.
So as you know, being Black in America as well, and especially in the corporate world, a lot of times it comes with some grave consequences. Uh,
Exactly.
but I feel like depending on the way, and I'm not saying you have to be ginger about it, but you have to use tact and you have to use wisdom, because if you don't use that, it defeats the purpose, in my opinion, especially with the way things are structured in this country.
Which is why it's so remarkable what your father was able to do, because there are risks in everything. But I think one of the things that you do in the film is to kind of show there's a delicate balance
Right.
of
Right.
standing up for what you believe. And then, you mentioned earlier how your father just was such an incredible teacher of children, and cultivating children and their self.
Definitely.
And he also had to protect them when, I mean,
Right.
another incident that you show is about they wanted to talk more about the beads on their hair than the performance.
Right.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely was.
And so I wonder, as a Black woman watching, and I remember when that happened, it was, watching the film that brought back the memory from that moment. I know what it's like to have to do our hair and make sure that the hair is right. And, you can't spend but so much time working on hair because you're out there practicing.
Right.
Um, but to be judged for hair, to be judged for a different body shape, different, as they got older, the clothing that they wore, Venus and Serena have been judged differently for every single thing from the moment they
Right.
stepped out on
Yeah.
to that tennis court. Um, in creating this film, Stuart, what do you think you show in the film that helps us to understand how they have been able to survive and thrive even with all that criticism?
I think to me, what was very important after Chavoita and I went to Shreveport, Louisiana, to see kind of the life lessons that were taught from Mr. Williams' mother to him
Yes.
about surviving in the face of adversity, and how he was able to do that from such a young age. Something clicked for me. I realized that actually those lessons were exactly the same lessons that he passed on to Venus and Serena. And it was this kind of intergenerational climb from his mother, who picked cotton in Shreveport, Louisiana, pretty much a single mother of 5 children, very poor, and how Richard was this conduit between that and what Venus and Serena ultimately became, which is two of the most successful people of all time. And so I really felt like that lesson was really important. And every time Mr. Williams talked to me about his mother, and Chavoita, you know this more than anything, this is where he gets the most emotional and he breaks down, and usually he will cry talking about her. So clearly she was such a big influence, and I wanted to make sure that the film was able to properly show that, and then also connect that with the way that he parented Venus and Serena, and how those same lessons were able to prepare them for what they would face on tour. And ultimately, I think that's why they were able to overcome this and deal with it and keep their head in the game and not let that bother them. And they did have this father that was willing to call out very blatantly, very openly in the biggest stages of the world. I mean, some of the interviews that you see are from 60 Minutes, which at that time,
Yes.
60 Minutes was like the program. Everyone tuned into it. And he's sitting there talking about racism in tennis at a time when, like you said earlier, no one in the white world really wanted to talk about racism. They wanted to pretend that it was not a thing really anymore, you know?
Right.
And that was pretty remarkable. And so I just wanted to make sure that that came across properly. in the film.
And I think you did a good job of it. And I'm glad you brought up this point of that 60 Minutes was everything back then. It was
Right.
it to be a guest on 60 Minutes meant a lot. It signaled a lot to the whole world who's watching. And the fact that Mr. Williams was clear and courageous enough to call out what he saw. It's interesting because activism exists in so many places. And I think we can very rightfully call Mr. Williams an activist who transformed this industry. I'm going to remind folks one last time, you're listening to Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole here on WBAI in New York City. That's 99.5 FM and everywhere online at WBAI.org. We are talking about this documentary that you absolutely must see. On the line, it's all about King Williams. It's wonderful. And the filmmakers are here with me. I will remind you just for a moment, because I want to get back to them. We need you. We need every one of you who's listening and everybody to ensure that the community of WBAI stays thriving, through everything. We have done this together because of your contributions and you tuning in to hear the wonderful stories that we bring to you. It's 24/7. I'm here every Friday morning at 9 a.m., but we've got programming 24/7, all to inspire you to just have the best life possible. So please join us in making a contribution. Call us today at 212-209-2950. You can also go online at give2wbai.org. We appreciate you, and we take the time to make sure that we bring folks to you who, when you leave, you are inspired to do whatever it is that your heart is telling you. That's where you should be focusing your attention. And it does make a difference when we focus our attention on what our heart tells us to do. We are so often distracted by other things, but if you can be in alignment with your dreams and with the goodness in your heart, imagine what this world can be. And that's what Dreamleapers is all about. So, gentlemen, I have a question. There was this feature film that came out about Mr. Williams, an Oscar-winning film that tells a number of the stories that are in the documentary. A lot of controversy around that Oscars presentation, but I'm just curious, as a feature film, tell the truth. What do you think? What did you think about that film? What worked? What was helpful? Maybe what not so much.
Stuart.
Yeah. Listen, I think King Richard was a remarkable film because it, obviously Will Smith, one of the greatest actors of our time, is playing Mr. Williams. And, as a dedicated father, he really nailed it. Obviously, he won the Oscar. So,
exactly.
And it was really about that period in their lives where they were in Compton, and then Venus Williams makes her professional debut. So there were definitely overlap between that film and our film, and we kind of go both before the Compton years to the Shreveport, Louisiana years where Mr. Williams grew up, but then also after that Venus Williams debut to what happened when they got on tour and kind of reacted to the entire tennis establishment on the national stage. And so I think hopefully that the two films can work really well together in the way that a lot of feature films and documentaries have worked well together, where the fictionalized version that's also heavily based on the real true story, because obviously Venus and Serena were involved and their sister. But then you have this documentary where we hear it in Richard Williams' own words and exactly how he felt about it the whole time. And so I think that the two projects hopefully will live well together. And if you're a fan of one, you might go check out the other. And to give really Mr. Williams the legacy that he really deserves, which is that he changed the sport of tennis, which changed the world. So like that, and we can all learn from the lessons of Mr. Williams changing the sport of tennis, which was a predominantly white sport at that time, and had these very strict ways of doing things that he refused to do. And I think both the King Richard and our film show that someone like Mr. Williams was going to, be a dream leaper, I will say. He was going to kind of change what he set his mind to, whatever that is. Whether it was tennis or something else, I think he would have changed the world either way. So, so I have a lot of respect for King Richard and the team behind that. And obviously that's a multi-million-dollar project with a lot of resources. And I'm also just happy what Chavoita and I were able to do here with the documentary and really just sit down with Mr. Williams and have these kind of painful conversations about his life and his childhood and also the levity about it too, because Mr. Williams is very funny and he still cracks jokes to this day. So on set, Chavoita and him would be joking around, teasing each other, laughing. Chavoita really the mood of the whole set changed when he was there because he understands his dad probably more than anyone. So it was really kind of a joy to work with him and his father on this. And yeah, so
the fact that Mr. Williams' role portrayed by Will Smith in a feature film won an Oscar. I mean, that's pretty outstanding, don't you think? All of those years, all that hard work, Chavoita, that your dad put into his family, into Venus and Serena, and for his story to be heralded in that way is something. It's kind of mind-boggling, huh?
Very, very surreal. So he was so excited by that. He was like he felt so honored. So he was in tears, to be honest. He was in tears.
I think so many of us were in tears behind that. And then, of course, it was a big old mess at the Oscars. So, I can't leave you without asking just a little bit about that. I mean, it's, so unfortunate that whatever the reasons were for that, for what we now call the slap, to witness that, what did that do to you, Chavoita?
The whole situation to me was hurtful. So, Will is so big of a figure in our community and to us. He is a dream leaper. So, he's one of those figures that you inspire to be, So, whatever the situation or whatever going on internally within him, I pray for his recovery. I pray for his return to the film world, because I don't think he made any films that I didn't like, from 6 Degrees of Separation throughout. Will is a phenomenal artist, actor, businessman. He's someone that, I look to fashion myself off from in life. So, it was very hurtful. I applaud Chris Rock the way he handled it. I don't know many black men that could have stood there and handled it the same way he handled it. But the situation, like I said, it was very bad. I hate that it took the light away from a lot of the other, like Shaquille O'Neal. He won an Oscar, his first Oscar that night as well, one of his projects. Right. So it was, in that way, very tearful. But like I said, I wish nothing but the best for everyone involved in the situation.
Where can people find your film? How can they watch your film?
Those details are a little bit under wrap right now, but we will announce it in the proper way of the home that we end up on. We had the 3 screenings at the Tribeca Film Festival, so that was really exciting to be able to premiere there in front of a live audience. New York audiences love tennis. They're home of US Open. They love the Williams family. So that was really exciting. And I think, just stay tuned and we will let you know where you can watch it in a worldwide premiere setting.
Well, it is really well done. An honor to have watched it myself and to be able to talk to you about the creation of this film. I think the timing is really incredible because there's been so much shine on Mr. Williams through the feature film. It only brings more shine to you. And I hope that people will get to see this documentary. The archival footage is just fascinating. And to learn that you had to dig it up because it all burned in a fire. That makes it even more precious.
All
So
right. Stuart did an awesome job. He did an awesome job.
So
it's
did
really well done. Congratulations, gentlemen, on the creation of this film On the Line. I hope that everyone gets to see it. Good luck. Can't wait to see what you make next. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great week.
You too.
Thank you.
Well, that was Dreamleapers with Harriet Cole. One more episode. You've got to see this film On the Line about Mr. Richards. Amazing. Mr. Williams, amazing film about this gentleman who has done so much. So until next time, have a great day and make it count.